Welcome back to the cave. This is Passion Week. This is a great time to get into the Word and read in the Gospels about the last week of Jesus' life, what he went through. Last time we looked at his triumphant entry into Jerusalem and all the prophecies surrounding that in Zechariah 9:9, Daniel 9, Psalm 118, Matthew 2, and there's many, many others. Today we're going to look at Monday, the next day. Let's see what happened then. Then he went into the temple and began to drive out those who bought and sold in it, saying to them, "It is written, my house is a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." And he was teaching daily in the temple, but the chief priests, the scribes, and the leaders of the people sought to destroy him, and were unable to do anything, for all the people were very attentive to hear him. And in other accounts, it talks about how he put together a scourge, and he drove out the money changers, and he overturned tables, and he was really showing God's wrath and God's sovereignty. And what's interesting is to understand what's happening here. Because of the religious sacrificial system that God had instituted for them, actually all the way back to the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. Remember, he put clothes of animal skins on them. They were probably lambskins. And thus started this sacrifice of animals so that the blood would, without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. And then as we got the law on Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, we see how God instituted the Ten Commandments, and then all the Levitical priesthood and duties, and all these sacrifices and festivals and feasts that the Jewish people were supposed to keep every year, which they did for the most part. And so Jesus has come into Jerusalem. He had a pilgrimage there, as they all did. And he rides into Jerusalem, and now it's Monday. He's cleansing the temple. And this business that they had set up was that people, as they came, they could bring their own sacrifice. A lot of these people were poor, dirt poor. And so they would raise their own animals, and they would try to pick the best of their flock, and they would bring that animal to be slain, sacrificed for their family for one calendar year. But the religious leaders saw some dollar signs in all this, and they said, hey, you know what we can do is, first of all, we need to inspect these animals because, they need to be without... God had made in Exodus, he told Moses and how the people were to prepare the Passover lamb. It was to be a lamb that was without spot or blemish, and a male from either the goats or the sheep or the goats. And he had some other things in there, not a bone would be broken. And so they had to be inspected. When someone brought their sacrifice, they had to be inspected. Well, naturally, these guys would find a defect in the animal that was brought. And so what are they going to do? Well, they have to buy a temple animal, or an animal that was brought there and brought there to be sold for this specific purpose. But that's not all. Wait, there's more. They would come from all over the country, and they would bring their currency, the money of their region. Well, I'm sorry, but the temple, they had to have temple currency. So they would exchange their shekels or whatever it was for temple currency. And, well, the exchange rate wasn't the same. So the bottom line was these religious leaders, they were making money. This was a business, a religious business. They were making money off of a religious institution that God had set up. And obviously God's not happy with things like that. And folks, today we can do the same thing in churches today. I always respect authors that maybe give out a book for free. I mean, they don't have to give away all their work. They deserve to earn money. Same with musicians. They deserve to earn money for their songs that they write. But every once in a while, it's nice to see maybe some of these artists maybe just donate some of their work to God, just to give it away. And Not only that, but they definitely shouldn't be selling it in the sanctuary or in the temple. There's no room for that. There's plenty of Christian bookstores, Amazon.com. There's ways that they can sell their product other than in the temple. I don't see any real difference. The motivation's different, but still, it's buying and selling in God's temple. So that was Monday. Now, here's the kicker. Since Jesus is causing some ripples in these religious leaders, he's crimping their style. He just wrecked their business. He just wrecked their profits. He just took away their profits. So obviously the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they're not real happy about this self-appointed prophet from Nazareth coming and acting like he's God. Well, he wasn't he? And he had the right to do exactly what he did. So the whole rest of the week, Tuesday and Wednesday, what happens is they convene these groups. They get together and they talk about, hey, we got to get rid of this Jesus of Nazareth. How do we do it? And so they come up with this idea of putting these spies. Because during this time, this was a great pilgrimage, one of the great pilgrimages to Jerusalem, the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And so it would naturally be full. It would be like a very joyous atmosphere. There would be the food establishments would be full. The taverns would be full. The hotels and such would be full, and there would just be a fellowship, a feeling of fellowship and of festivity, just electricity in the air during this time. And so a lot of them would gather in the temple area, and they would discuss scripture, they would discuss God, they would pray together, they would sing songs together, much like we do today when we're fellowshipping with other believers and just want to lift up and glorify the name of God. That's what they were doing. So these religious leaders said that they would infiltrate the group because Jesus was going to the temple. It says in Luke 19 that it says that every day Jesus was going to the temple to teach, and then at nighttime he would withdraw to the Mount of Olives and pray. He did this every day during this week, the Passion Week. He went to the temple to teach all day long, and then he went at evening time and he prayed in the garden. And so they had this idea that to infiltrate his group, and then with these fake, disciples, and that they would ask questions to trip him up in an attempt to trip him up, to get him to say something so that they could bring charges against him and just get rid of him. I mean, I don't know that they were thinking about killing him right away, but I mean, obviously that's what happened. But at first they just wanted to get some evidence against him to condemn him with a crime so they could just get rid of him for this week because he was just causing trouble in their minds. Well, that didn't really happen. Because what Jesus did, every time they asked him a question about Caesar, you're telling everybody not to pay taxes, right, Jesus? Well, that's not what he said at all. He said to give to Caesar what's Caesar's and give to God what's God's. So, and they would ask him other things about John, John the Baptist. Remember that was his cousin, Jesus' cousin, and how he leaped in the womb of not Mary, Elizabeth. And, when Jesus was near. So God had a plan. John was to make way. He was to come. He was the forerunner before Jesus was to come, making the way, readying the way for Jesus. And what's interesting is he was very popular. John the Baptist was very popular among the people. And so they came to him and they said, well, hey, John's apostles, disciples fast, and, John's disciples do this and do that, but how come yours don't? And they were always trying to put Jesus at odds and make him trip up and say something. But Jesus was very clever. He always, instead of answering their questions, he would always ask a question and say, well, I tell you what, I'll answer your question if you answer mine. And he was just so clever with this. So that's kind of the way the week was going. Basically, just teaching at the synagogue, at the temple, and then at nighttime praying. And meantime, they were plotting against him. And then, of course, we know that Judas is going to go to the high priest, and he's going to he's gonna go ahead and agree to lead them to Jesus and eventually betray him for 30 pieces of silver. What's interesting is the way that they plotted to get Jesus. They could have grabbed him all week long. He was at the temple every day. But they chose to wait and do it at nighttime, in the dark of night. And it's interesting how the Bible talks about how, dark, evil kind of loves the darkness, and evil deeds are done at nighttime. And this is certainly what's going to happen to Jesus. That's all the time we have for today. So I hope you tune into the next video where we're going to talk about the Last Supper. Actually, it was the last Passover that Jesus would spend with his disciples. So until then, Shalom Mishpachah.